Hey, it's Pastor Jim. I just had a little pastoral word I wanted to share with you as I think about what God is doing in my life and in our world. There's a sense that when we're in the wilderness, when we're in between things, that somehow what's going on is not meaningful. That what's going on is just something we need to get through, get it done with, so we can get on to the next thing. But if you read the story of the Exodus in the Bible, there's a period of 40 years where the people wander in the wilderness. And it's not by accident, and it's not because God has nothing to do in the wilderness. It's actually because God has specific things to do in the wilderness that perhaps were not going to happen anywhere else. And I want to call attention to a couple of those and see if we can't analogize those to our own lives. One, as God led the Israelites out into the desert, they were leaving behind Egypt, which, though it was a place of slavery, it was a place that had provided for them. And they had learned to worship the Pharaoh and live under the rulership of the Egyptian government and the Egyptian gods. Part of what God needed to do in the wilderness was to get people to leave behind their old gods, to stop worshiping things that they had depended on. When Moses goes up the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, and the people immediately make a golden calf and start worshiping the golden calf, that always seems strange. It's like, what's wrong with them? God just led them through the Red Sea. Why are they off worshiping a gold calf again? Well, they're just operating from the paradigm they knew. In Egypt, when a pharaoh died, they would worship the bull god and ask the bull god to choose which pharaoh was to be next. And so Moses disappears up a mountain in the clouds, and they figure their pharaoh, their king, is gone. Better ask the bull god to bring us a new one. They're just operating from the paradigms they already knew. And God led them through a season in the wilderness so as to shake off the old gods. It's to say those gods won't provide for you anymore. Stop running back to those old gods. We as a society, immediately in the midst of this quarantine and crisis, ran to science and money. Those are our gods. Let's throw money at science, and that'll fix the problem. Now, resources are a great thing. Having resources to do ministry with are a great thing. And scientific inquiry is a great thing. Using the human mind to investigate the world and adapt the world to important purposes like medicine. Those are great things. But when they take the place of God, they've stopped being tools for ministry, and they've started being idols. And I think in this season in the wilderness, we ought to take note of what we have made our idols. Secondly, in the wilderness, God had to teach his people to depend on him. They were used to their kingdom providing for them. And though they were slaves, they had food, they had places to live, they had ordered society, they had structure, they had normalcy of some kind or another. God led them out in the wilderness and reduced them to depending on him every day. They were hungry for food, and bread fell from the sky. It was called manna from heaven, right? Bread fell from the sky. And God told them, you can only pick up enough for today, because if you keep it till tomorrow, it'll rot. So only in the morning, only gather enough bread for the day, and that's it. And later, when Jesus will teach his disciples to pray, give us this day our daily bread, it's a throwback Thursday. It's a throwback to the Exodus, to the remembrance that God wants us to learn to depend on him every day, not to depend on normalcy and structure and government and everything that we've got that just keeps things running, but instead every day to turn to him. It might be in the season of wilderness in our lives that God is working to teach us to depend on him every day. The Israelites didn't stay in the wilderness forever. I mean, eventually they make it back to they make it onto their promised land, and it's going to be a new kingdom with a new king and new structures and new society and a new normal where they're not slaves anymore. But I know what God wanted for them when they got into their new kingdom was that they would continue to depend on him every day, not to turn back to idol making, not to make an idol of their new society or their new kingdom or their new king, but instead to continue asking God every day, give us this day our daily bread, and to watch the kinds of miracles that God could bring about when they trusted him. Well, I hope that's what God is doing for all of us. I hope in the midst of this wilderness, we're not just racing to the next normal that we can turn into an idol. I hope that we're learning to pray, and pray with deep hearts and with a deep hope for what God can do amongst us. And I hope as we learn to pray. We see God providing for us each day. Maybe not enough that we can see into the future. Maybe not enough for 2 weeks from now, but just enough for today, so that we'll know we can depend on Him, and so that we'll know that He's good. I think that's what God wants to do in our wilderness, and I wouldn't race to get it over with quickly. God is doing good things as we wander. That said, Reunion Sunday is coming. The day's coming where we will all worship together again in the same house. And I look forward to that day, not to make an idol of it, but because it's a day in which we get to honor our God. God bless you guys. Blessings on your week.